Hi everyone, it's been a busy last couple of months, but I'm getting back to a bit of retro stuff, which I'm quite happy about. Before I get on to the retro stuff, well, it actually is kind of retro. I recently picked up this analog pocket. I might do a review of it later. It's effectively a new Game Boy, but can also run emulated games. It's actually in my bag, so I haven't got it here. But I was getting out some old games, and I found my old Game Boy, Kirby's Dream Land and Pokemon, some of my favourite old Game Boy games. These are the only two games I really kept. But yeah, it's a really cool device. I really like it. It's better than I expected. So I've been playing with that a bit. But what arrived today, which is the topic of this video, is a new video card. Now, I've been building up my collection of AT machines for a while now, and I've got 4. I'm hoping I keep it at about 4, but we'll see. But what I've been focusing on is these 2 machines. This one here is my 286 running at 16 megahertz with 4 meg RAM, and this one here is my 386 DX40 currently with 20 meg of RAM. Now, the DX40 is an awesome machine. It's really fast. I've been playing a lot of games on it. And one of the games I've been playing is Bio Menace, which is an old Apogee game that was actually one of the first platformers I ever played. And I remember playing that on my first computer, which was a 286 12 megahertz. This machine here is a 286 16 megahertz. So perfect candidate for the game. It actually, should work quite well. And it does work, but I've noticed that it's a little bit slower than I expected. More I think it's a VGA graphics card issue. I'm not sure. Not sure if it's the 286 is just a bit slow at running the game and that's how it was, and I don't remember it being that slow, or it is the graphics in it is not great. So in this machine, I've got a Trident 8900CL 1 megabyte VGA card, and in this machine, I've got a Tseng Labs ET4000AX. So pretty well-known card. So this runs Bio Menace really nicely. Now this one runs it fine. It is slower to load, which I expected, but it just doesn't feel like, I don't know, it's not as smooth as I feel it should be. Now the Trident 8900 has a few different cards in its era, in its range, and I know that I think the ABCs are all pretty slow. But this card has the CL, which I've read is fairly similar to the D revision, and it should be quite quick. But I wanted to see, I basically was going to take out the video card out of this and put it in here. But as I started researching, I found out that the ET4000 was never really a high-end card. It was actually a mid-range budget card, which really confused me because they're so sought after now. But what I found out that the reason they were so popular back in the day was that they were very good value and very quick. And it's interesting because the card's not without its flaws. I'm not sure it's actually the card's fault, but many Apogee games require you to turn on SVGA compatibility mode for it to run. So I did a bit of researching and found out that there is actually the WD chipset cards are actually really good. And some of them are really terrible, but some of the later ones are really good. Anyway, I found this one. Let me just move this over. So it's a SpeedStar 24X, and it's got the, if we zoom in, you can see it's the WD90C31. So there are a few different ones. There was the 30, the 31, and the 33 are all meant to be quite good. And this one is the 31, but this card's meant to be very nice. So it was not cheap to buy on eBay, but it just arrived. And I really wanted to see how well it is, how fast it is, and if it fixes my issue with Bio Menace. Now, I was actually originally planning on, I bought this card for this computer, but I'm actually thinking it's going to be better than the Tseng Labs. So today we're going to do a benchmark of all three. So the Trident 8900CL, the ET4000, and this WD card. They're all 1 meg, they're all ISA, and I'm going to test them in both machines. So I'm really curious to see, at what point does it not matter on the 286? Honestly, I thought while the Trident not a fantastic card, it would be totally bottlenecked by the CPU. But I'm starting to think maybe not. So I haven't quite worked out what benchmarks I'm going to do. Don't remember exactly what it's going to run on the 286. The 386 will give us probably a better indication of what card is better, but I'm also curious as if the Trident is bottlenecking the 286. Now, I could test it in 486s and things like that as well, but really, if you're running a 486, a higher-end 486, you're probably running VLB or PCI. So the ISA cards are quite interesting to me, and really, there's not that many good options out there. And this, unfortunately, was quite expensive, but it looks in really good condition, really nice-looking card. So I'm quite looking forward to it. So anyway, let's crack them open. I'll get some probably benchmarks going with the current setup. So ET4000 and the Trident. And probably should do it on the 286 first to see what works. But I've got the 386 going already. It's all hooked up and cabled in because I was playing Bio Menace on it. So I'll start with this one. Probably use Phil's computer benchmarks. And just do a bunch of benchmarks on this, and then whatever this one can run, I'll do a graph and we can compare them. And then it's going to be a bit of swapping, but I'll put the Tseng into here, and then the WD into here, and then move them around again. Because I wouldn't mind testing all three cards in both machines. So that's the goal of this video. This is the ET4000. Quite a nice looking card, really, this one. And the BIOS is from 1990. And this one, I think this one was 92? Not sure now. So yeah, I mean, my 386 is from 93, the board. It's quite a late model because it's a DX40. So I wanted something that was similarly late model as well. Yeah, so this is 18th week of 92. That makes sense. So, yeah, quite a bit newer. But yeah, this was a good card back in 1990. This would have been an amazing card. Really nothing was much better than that for a couple of years in ISA, it seems. Anyway, I've just pulled out the Tseng. Let's put in the WD. I just booted up the card and it posted but then froze just after it done all the detection on the BIOS screen, and I've just taken off the jumper that set 0 wait states, and that's fixed it. So I'm not sure if I need to do some BIOS tweaking. My benchmark scores were fine, but not the best before with the ET4000. In line, but not amazing. So let's try anyway with the current BIOS settings and the without the 0 wait state, and then we'll see. So, onto the benchmarks. You can see I've got the two systems here, the AMD 286 and the AMD 386. The 386 also has an IIT floating point unit, although I don't think that will make any difference to the benchmarks. As you can see, the 386 is quite a nice machine, as it also has 128K of L2 cache. Now jumping on to the video cards. We've got the three cards as discussed, the ET4000, the Trident, and the Diamond SpeedStar. Now, I wasn't able to get the SpeedStar to work with the 0 wait states. That might be something that I look at more in future, but for this test, as you'll see, it doesn't really seem to matter. It runs very well, and it's a really nice card, basically. So the first test is with the 286. Now, I couldn't run many benchmarks with the 286. I'm using Phil's computer benchmark DOS pack. So in this first test, you can see here that the ET4000 and the WD are tying which you'll see becomes a very common theme, while the Trident is falling behind ever so slightly. So even on the 286, there is a small difference. Now, it's a 4% or something difference, and so not probably something you would notice. And even at this frame rate, it's not going to make the game playable. But I did think it was interesting that the Trident is slower. Now, when we go through these benchmarks, you'll see the Trident is often slower, and I think that it's potentially more the way it communicates with the bus and not necessarily the chipset itself as to the reason why it's slower, because it's often consistently slower on both machines, no matter what resolution and things like that. So let's jump over to the same test again using the 386. Now you can see here the difference is a little bit greater. Again, still not a huge difference, but you can see here that the Trident is falling behind a little bit. Now I did mention that I thought my 386 was not underperforming, but I have seen people getting 15 and a half, maybe even close to 16 in 3D Bench. I'm not too concerned about it. I haven't tweaked the BIOS too much. I'm sure there are some weight states that can be changed. I'm actually very happy with my 386 performance. But yeah, so you can see here again, the 4000, the ET4000 and the WD are matching up. Now onto 3D Bench 1.0C. I believe this just runs the same test, but it's designed for faster machines. As you can see, the results are basically the same as the other one, so nothing of interest here. Chris's 3D Bench, again, you can see that the Tseng is matching the WD, while the Trident is falling behind again. And then I also tested with the resolution at 640 by 480. I was curious to see if, maybe if you up the resolution, that the difference between the Trident and the Tseng increased, or we could even see a difference between the WD and the ET4000. But no, we're getting very consistent scores. Now this might be a bottleneck of the 386 CPU, and it probably is. So in future it might be worth testing these cards in a faster 486. Again, PC Player, very similar results here. I actually ran some of these tests quite a few times because I was confused at the ET4000 and the WD always getting the same results. Now to Doom. This is where we actually get a slight difference between the ET4000 and the WD. Now this first screen here is the real ticks, so the lower the better. The reason I put this on here, it just makes it a bit easier to see the difference between the WD and the ET4000. But I will jump over to the frames a second, which I've got here. And you can see here there's actually a bit of a difference. The Trident is falling back by almost 4 frames a second. So that's fairly significant. And it is interesting that the WD is ever so slightly, again, you would never notice it, but it is ever so slightly faster than the ET4000. So I'm actually pretty happy that the WD is faster, because I did spend a fair bit on it. So, and it is meant to be a really nice card. So really happy with the WD card in terms of performance. It's kept up with the ET4000, and in this benchmark, slightly better. And then I also went for max details. I'll just jump over to the frames a second. And you can see here that, yes, again, the Trident is really falling back compared to the other two cards. I thought maybe at this higher resolution or detail that we would get more difference between the ET4000 and the WD, but we're not. Again, maybe that's a CPU bottleneck. And then the final test is the landmark characters per millisecond test. Again, this is really interesting that the ET and the WD are matching exactly. I believe this is again down to the bus speed, less so the actual chipset. And this is where we can see the Trident falling behind a bit. So overall, the Trident is definitely a very slight bottleneck for both the 386 and the 286. I actually had really not many issues with it other than Bio Menace. And as you'll see shortly, the WD and the ET4000 actually perform a little bit differently in Bio Menace than all these benchmarks would show. The ET4000 runs Bio Menace better, but only in the transition screens where it's doing loading or it's like fading in and out. So in this next clip, I've got the 3 cards running Bio Menace. I've got it running at 20% of the speed, so you can see how the screen transitions occur. This is on the 286, but on the 386 you can see the same thing. The Trident is quite slow. WD is faster, but it isn't as fast as the ET4000. And that concludes the benchmarks for this video. Sorry about some background noise. We've got a lot of cicadas going off at the moment, which is what that noise is. I've decided to keep the ET4000 in the 386, as the 386 plays Bio Menace ever so slightly faster anyway, and also the ET4000 is perfect for Bio Menace. As you can see, the transition screens are slightly better. This SpeedStar is a great card, and I would definitely use it in a ISA only 486. My 286 is actually a very nice machine with a good motherboard and a nice sound blaster. So I've decided to keep it in the 286 as it is an improvement over the Trident. Now I've got 3 clips of Bio Menace running on the 3 different video cards on the 286, just so you can see how it plays. The main area where it slows down a bit is you can see when you kill some of the aliens, some of their guts and stuff lag a little bit, and that you don't get on the 386. It's minor, but that's the big difference. Anyway, thank you again, and we'll talk soon.